Welcome to the Collector Car Guru Story Time. I'm Sam Bear, the Collector Car Guru. Cars take both time and money. If you have less of one, you better have more of the other. Now, I actually coined that line during my automotive journalism days, and to be quite honest, I'm pretty dang proud of it. To be fair, the word cars could just as easily have been replaced in the saying with about any resource-heavy hobby, project, or venture. When it comes to automobiles, however, it really behooves one to fully appreciate ahead of time the degree to which time and money are inexorably linked. This is why I've always considered Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon the official soundtrack for the car hobby, as this groundbreaking and record-setting 1973 album's two biggest hits were the songs Time and Money. It also delves into themes of mental illness, which is also pretty apropos, considering one needs an unhealthy bit of crazy to be a good car hobbyist. Unless you've been a hermit Alaskan homesteader your whole life, you've likely also heard that old saying claiming time is money. I'd argue, however, apart from attorneys, humans habitually undervalue their own time. Even professional mechanics find themselves losing track of time, even though they're billing for it. So it is truly unrealistic for any home garage hobbyist to always accurately account for each hour dedicated to the care and feeding of their own personal automobiles. That being said, spending an unfathomable amount of time of one's life restoring a car is often used as a bragging right when the result is a show winner. On the other hand, those ultimately contracting a pro for their expertise, certifications, tools, and equipment to do the job right, well, they often minimize said cumulative sum of hourly labor, as it usually carries a really high price tag, and it's enough to warrant hiding the bill from their spouse. Money buys automobiles, more money is necessary to maintain them. We need money to insure our vehicles, just in case we must bear the cost of replacing not only our own property, but also that of which is owned by others, bearing the literal impact from our momentary miscalculations of the laws of physics. Improving and personalizing is a great way to run up a solid credit card balance, as the cost of wheels, tires, and performance parts like high-flow exhausts, intakes, carburetors, fuel injection conversion kits, nitrous, and uprated suspension components are oh so easy to convince yourself you need in a moment of weakness and click and buy on any of the all too many online part suppliers. Of course, nothing quite eviscerates a savings account quite like the cost of fully restoring a vehicle. This is where the balance of the time and money really comes into sharp focus. Despite what cable television car reality shows portray, the concept of a full vehicle restoration in 7 days or we lose the shop is simply fantasy. A real nut and bolt restoration can take a respected professional shop well over 2 years and carry a cost in the 6 figures. If the owner needs it quicker, it'll cost more. On the other hand, if the owner has a lot of time but little money, the restoration will have to be done by the owner, him or herself. This means bargain shopping for parts, tools, and supplies, begging for help from friends, and for those 2- and 4-person jobs like lifting the body. And it's not uncommon for a cash-strapped restoration to span 10 to 15 years, putting all those pieces together. At the end of it all, those thinking that they're going to come even close to recouping the cost of a full restoration done professionally or on a budget? Well, the second to last song on Dark Side of the Moon, Brain Damage, well, it's for you. Even if the lyrics mention that the lunatics are in my hall rather than in my garage. It makes sense with all these large costs associated with owning multiple old cars that when most people envision car collectors, they mentally jump to picturing exorbitantly wealthy people with private jets and beach estates and summering on a yacht in the Mediterranean. In reality, the overwhelming majority of collectors fall directly and painfully into the middle class. For every Jay Leno or Ralph Lauren boasting private secured warehouse garages lined with the most famous, desirable, and valuable classic vehicles ever assembled below glowing vintage neon dealers' signs, there are tens of thousands of anonymous hoarders of cars, trucks, and motorcycles, at which they've thrown all too much good money after bad. Drive the back roads of our nation, and you'll certainly notice plenty of dilapidated double-wide trailers with hedgerows seemingly sprouting multiple non-running rust bucket Ford trucks, Chevy Corvairs, or Pontiac Fieros. The lack of inclusion of these salt-of-the-earth folks on the Forbes 400 list obviously never stopped them from pursuing their own crazy collecting ambitions. And though all too many collections have a current realistic market value akin to a moldy 20-year-old hot tub, relative to their annual income, these collectors have spent a percentage of their cumulative take-home pay on automobiles that would drive any certified financial planner to go on a Xanax with whiskey chaser bender capable of making even Motley Crue circa 1984 blush. Just because someone has an amazing man cave full of stunning cars, trucks, and motorcycles doesn't mean they can actually afford it. Thanks to overzealous lending institutions which make money on our incessant need to spend it, as well as generations without any effective middle and high school programs teaching healthy personal finance best practices, too many Americans appear to be multimillionaires while literally having a net worth of less than zero. We all know far too many people who drive cars and live in houses they simply cannot afford, thanks only to nifty consumer lending tricks like zero down loans and no payments until next year trickery. This comfort with credit is reflected in the relative change in average household income versus the average cost of a brand new car. Now, in 1967, the year my parents got married, the median cost of a new car was $2,750, and the median household income was $7,200. This means back then that the median average family spent 38% of their annual gross income on a median new car. By 2021, it had gone up to 65% of income, spending just over $40,000 for a new vehicle with only a $61,937 median family income. Now, when it comes to collector cars, it gets even far easier to get lost in the weeds of numbers because there are so many more data points than even Taylor Swift songs about ex-boyfriends. Still, enthusiasts and casual car admirers all place far too much emphasis on isolated value data points of vehicles they own, or often owned in the days long since past. This is especially common when viewed through the lens of a vehicle's original manufacturer's suggested retail price. I've probably heard, "I should have never sold that car because you know what it's worth now?" almost as many times as I've heard my wife complain about something I did, or didn't do for that matter. Perspective is really important though, as a 1965 K-Code Mustang convertible worth $60,000 right now might be viewed as a king's ransom in comparison to its $3,078 original price. On the other hand, when one realizes that $60,100 was the MSRP for a new Mustang GT500 convertible nearly a decade ago, it is apparent that price inflation has hit all of Ford's pony cars, not just the classic ones. As we all know, people make the decision to sell a vehicle for many reasons. Sometimes it's an extra vehicle that's no longer used when the kids leave the nest, while the opposite also happens. A one-vehicle family expecting a baby sells their fun two-seat sports car for a family ride capable of carrying car seats in back. Usually, however, the decision is based on a more nebulous set of criteria, including reoccurring costs of fixing their current vehicle, the lack of features now available in newer models, or price incentives offered by manufacturers and new car dealers to entice to trade up. No matter how we convince ourselves a new to us car is the right choice, in purely financial terms, it's rarely a net positive economic decision, since it's always more cost effective to repair a car than replace it. But as somebody who majored in marketing, I quickly learned it's far easier and exponentially more effective to appeal to the American public's wants without consideration of their financial best interests. Poor spending habits are actually institutionalized in this country. If America had a nickel for every single one of its citizens' bad economic decisions, there would be no national debt. Let's face it, we Americans, we want what we want when we want it. Maybe that should replace e pluribus unum on our currency. The televised celebrations of impulse purchases we call collector car auctions are an entertaining case study in communicating very incomplete pictures of financial realities to the viewing public. Collector car auctions focus so much attention on the sales price of each vehicle. Whether attending in person or viewing a simulcast with added commentary, seldom does one actually get an accurate analysis of a win versus a loss. It sounds really impressive when the hammer drops at $120,000 for a pristine 1969 Camaro Z28. And it never takes long for all the owners of the 20,302 Z28s made that year to believe their own cars, be it restored or clapped out, missing the engine, rusty Hulk, is all worth the same. Somehow, all too few consider these realities. The seller didn't pocket $120,000 in profit. Auction sellers generally pay 10%, in this case $12,000, in sales commission. Plus, they pay another couple $100 in listing fees. Often a few grand to have that professional carrier pick the car up for them and ship it to the auction venue. And there's that unmentioned piece of information, which is how much that seller actually had in originally purchasing and then in restoration receipts, which often exceeds $200,000. And don't forget, this financial albatross $120,000 69 Camaro Z28 actually immediately cost the buyer an additional 10% or $12,000 in buyer's fees, and then even more to ship the car home and insure. And with this now somewhere around $135,000 Camaro, is there any guarantee this buyer will recoup all of his or her receipts when they sell it? Absolutely not. And to make this Z28 purchase decision even more complicated, is it a truly greater, rarer, more ultra desirable, more fun to drive, more luxurious, faster, prettier? Or will it part the sea of unwashed masses like a wedge to cheers and fanfare at a more grandiose level than all the cars worth $134,999 or less? Yeah, I mean, if only. Look, what we buy, sell, and what we desire, and how we spend our time is a purely personal decision. Those of us who agree will enable us, and those who disagree will think we're crazy or wasteful. Here are two dirty little secrets. One, the value of money is relative to each of the parties exchanging it. And two, time is a totally independent factor on which various absolute and relative values are placed at any given moment. How time affects value and value affects time is always in flux. When it comes to a vehicle, be it new, used, or a collector's item, its worth and deciding whether or not it is now or was at some point a good buy can change via the lens and perspective of this snapshot of a specific moment in time. A decision like trading in a 1967 Corvette Stingray 427 435 horsepower tri-power convertible for a new 1975 Chevy Impala station wagon right before a birth of a child could have been objectively the soundest, best route at the time, yet look artificially boneheaded in retrospect. In the same manner, a seemingly truly futile, stupid action like spending an entire life savings to be the first one on the block to buy a 2005 Ford GT Heritage Edition can on rare occasion be bailed out by wild and totally unreasonable market forces which make this reckless, thoughtless buyer seem 20 years later like Warren Buffett. Human nature deems we like to keep score so we can easily separate the winners from the losers. Because of this, automotive articles, social media, and old school hobbyist grapevine will continue to evaluate buying and selling decisions by absolute monetary terms. But you and I both know that they shouldn't be. Healthy doses of perspective reveal some perceived losses represent real-world wins, just as contemporary financial wins are holistic losses. Selling that Corvette for a station wagon, no matter if these cars represent an exponential difference in monetary value now, says nothing about the intrinsic value of time spent experiencing the joys of parenthood and eventually maybe being a grandparent. And sure, there's no guarantee at all that any given child will not grow up to be a nightmare or parental disappointment a la Charles Manson, R. Kelly, Hunter Biden, or Eric Trump. But by the same token, it's also possible any child brings not only immense love and pride, but also the benefits when he or she grows up to become a Wall Street hedge fund billionaire. Hey, time will only tell. Pink Floyd's lyrics in Time are a cautionary tale of wasting life with the implication that life is on a ticking clock. And all too often, when we're young, we do not value the seconds, the minutes, the hours, the days, like we should. It's a warning not to procrastinate, to be productive and experience life. Flip the vinyl record to side 2 of Dark Side of the Moon, and its opener, Money, paints a contrasting picture. Guitarist David Gilmour sings about valuing the utility of cash, maybe a little too much, getting raises to make a stash and buy things like new car, caviar, and think I'll buy me a football team. One only needs to talk to a gray-haired enthusiast at a car show for a case study of Dark Side of the Moon in the real world. As my wife's then 90-year-old grandfather once explained about the most common discussion at his weekly meeting of the old car collectors, where both owners and their cars were indeed old, at the Denny's off exit 7 on 405 in Renton, Washington. Quote, the guys all realize that they're never going to get around to finish all of their project cars. Time with no money, and your time certainly will be wasted. Money and no time, you either pay for somebody else's time or wait until you have your own. Value each too much, and you die with unfinished business and a garage full of stalled projects ravaged by the effects of time in rust, mold, shrinkage, rot. On the other hand, placing too little value on both time and money can just as well result in a garage full of restored cars, which are beautiful, but also a couple of divorces and a handful of children who want nothing to do with you for always selfishly investing resources in your vehicles instead of them. So in discussion of time and money, it's always worth stepping back and focusing on the big picture. With this perspective, our real life personal stories are intertwined with vehicles, time, and money, and are sprinkled with opportunities to learn and laugh. And sometimes, determining if a decision was good or bad becomes as obvious as a lone Hummer parked in a sea of white VW Beetles. I'm Sam Barer, the Collector Car Guru, and this was Collector Car Guru's Storytime. Tune in next time.